Hello guys, welcome back to the MMA Sucka Podcast. My name is Frazer Krohn and thank God I'm joined by Tim Wheaton this week because there is a really good card to break down and I'm looking forward to Tim's insight. Obviously I've been doing the last couple on my own and we were just talking off air. It was a tough sell this past weekend's UFC Fight Night card. We'll jump into that. We'll jump into a little bit of analysis on maybe what the wins mean and then look ahead, full steam ahead, UFC 290, International Fight Week. Massive card. Tim, how's things?
Man, we finally made it. I'm glad that my vacations coincided with bad UFC fight cards so that we're not missing any of the good stuff. But yeah, it's been a rough couple of weeks for the UFC in terms of I'm not sure that the UFC has been winning the news cycles for the last couple of weeks in terms of what's going on with the PFL, even what's going on in some of the shows from One Championship. Even KSW's had some really, really good stuff going on. Even some of the Bellator cards have been better than the UFC. But I mean, the UFC finally put together a good card. This one's International Fight Week live from Las Vegas, and there are some really good fights on this card. 2 championships, and yeah, let's jump in. Let's break it down. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, so we'll start by just looking at the weekend that was. There wasn't an awful lot. It's a classic for us. It's a classic. Not getting up in the middle of the night card. It's not one that's going to get me up at 3 a.m. to watch it. It was Sean Strickland headlining again. Not only is he headlining again, but he's in the Apex again. And traditionally, he doesn't have a fight style that transfers very well to the Apex. This fight kind of went against that, which is, it's good, but, written in my notes here, are we surprised? Why did Magomedov go out so fast and look to finish Sean Strickland? Has he never seen Sean Strickland fight before? He's notoriously hard to finish. In recent times, the only people that finished him are Alex Pereira, I think Alex Pereira could finish most heavyweights, let alone most middleweights. It's almost like someone who has a 1-0 record and has spent just 19 seconds in the UFC shouldn't be fighting in the main event. Disgust. This is what happens when you put a guy who's got a 19. Don't get me wrong, he's got a pretty decent career outside. He's fought in PFL. I think he's fought for.
He fought in KSW as well.
KSW, yeah. But it's 19 seconds in the UFC, and yes, it's a phenomenal knockout. Don't get me wrong, but should he be in the main event? We questioned it. Is there something that the UFC have seen that we didn't see? Is there something that the matchmakers thought this is the next guy? We need a new Darren Till's out of the division now, out of the UFC. We've got Tom Aspinall, but the heavyweight division isn't that deep. Do we need a new European star? Magomedov could have been that, and after 5 minutes. I mean, that second round, I'd love to get your analysis on it, but he looked like he was completely gone after 3 minutes 30 of the round. Sorry, with 3 minutes 30 remaining in the round. He was staring at the clock, looking out the octagon. It's a great finish for Strickland. He didn't go searching for it. He just let it come to him organically. It was a barrage of shots rather than that one punch knockout power that we know that he doesn't have. And that I did a little bit of looking. That's his first finish at 185 pounds. Yes, he finished Brendan Allen, but that was at a catch rate of 190. He doesn't have knockout power. It's clear for everyone to see. He's stamina for days, Sean Strickland.
Yes.
He doesn't have knockout power. And he knocked out Magomedov in the second round. It wasn't like a fifth round where he let that stamina really play into his favor. I just don't. The UFC dropped the ball on this one massively.
Yeah, so with major fights, you always want some sort of storyline going in, and stories is the way that we communicate fights in terms of this person is trying to put their stamp on this because they're trying to reach this point. This person wants to overcome this, and that's going to happen in the fight. Even if sometimes things don't make sense in terms of storytelling, you have to put things on these fights of this person's, going through this struggle in their life, and they're going to overcome this by fighting, some weird thing like this. This fight event, Abus Magomedov versus Sean Strickland, had the storyline of the UFC needed a main event. So they just found 2 guys who were willing to be in the main event, and there was nothing more to it. There was nothing greater to it. We all saw through the facade of this could be any guy. This could be Action Man Chris Curtis. This could be this guy. This could be that guy. Nope. They found some guy with one fight in the UFC so they could pay him like 10-10 probably. And then he showed up not in shape. He showed up somehow not conditioned against Sean Strickland of all people, which was unfortunate because even though he was getting outstruck, there was a few ideas that he had in this fight, like the kicks to the body, which could have actually built on something going into later rounds. But no, it just became another win. And now the worst part, and I'm sure you agree with this, the worst part is you got to listen to people being like, does Sean Strickland deserve a title shot off this? Frazer, what are these people on about?
Again, this is what I've written in my notes. The worrying thing is there's a chance that Sean Strickland gets a title shot next. We know that the UFC are looking for an opponent for Israel Adesanya in September. I think it's September for Australia. And the middleweight division is pretty sort of scheduled, as it were, at the moment. If we just look at the middleweight division, obviously, we'll go on to break down the potential next contender, the logical next contender coming out of this weekend, Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis.
Yeah.
But Jared Cannonier, is there a real big sort of want to see him back in the title shot? I don't want to see that, to be honest. With the greatest respect to Cannonier, it was one of the most one-sided fights that we've seen. And Cannonier seemed to, for want of a better phrase, shit the bed when he got in there against Israel Adesanya.
Yeah, he had nothing at all.
You've then got Sean Strickland, obviously not booked for a fight, but it's coming off that win. That's why he might be next. Marvin Vettori obviously just lost. Roman Dolidze just lost. Then you've got Dricus du Plessis, obviously fighting Robert Whittaker. We'll go on to talk about that later on. And then you've got Paulo Costa, who's coming off a win against Luke Rockhold, which, it's not a bad win. But then he's fighting at UFC 291 at the end of the month against Ikram Aliskerov. Does a win against a guy who, again, is 1-0 in the UFC, does that warrant a title shot? I think the next deserving contender after the guys that are in the middleweight fight this weekend is Sean Strickland. And I don't want to say that because I don't want to see Sean Strickland anywhere near. The amount of media that he does for an Apex card pisses me off because he's just batshit crazy. But I don't want to see him in the main event. I don't want to see him having to travel over to Australia to bore fans and get finished by Israel Adesanya. I've got no interest in that. If you think about Sean Strickland's fighting style, his walk forward style of I'm just going to walk forward with my hands relatively low, a la Alex Pereira, and get landed on. It's not an entertaining fight for Israel. I don't think it's. What I'm worried about that as well is I don't think we'd get the best Israel Adesanya. How does he get up for a Sean Strickland fight? He knows he can finish Sean Strickland 10 days out of 10. 7 days a week and twice on Sundays. It's not an entertaining fight for me, in my opinion.
So, and one of the things, even from our perspective, we get the feeling that we know where Sean Strickland's ceiling is. We know how good he is based on how he consistently performs. He fights week in, week out. He usually fights 5 rounds, so we have tons of tape on him. We've seen him fight tons of times against top-ranked contenders like Alex Pereira and having very boring fights against Jared Cannonier. I feel like I understand where his ceiling is, and he's not a championship contender. Now, Israel Adesanya isn't stupid in any way. I think he would have that same feeling. Like you said, he wouldn't get out of bed for Sean Strickland. That doesn't motivate him. Who cares about that, right? What do you do with this division? I would prefer Paulo Costa and Sean Strickland to face off. I think that's a fair fight. I think it's a good fight. I expect Paulo Costa probably to win the next fight. Who really knows? You can't. This guy's hard to pin down. And then, you have the fight coming up at 290. Sorry, go ahead there.
No. I agree. It's a logical next fight. Both guys, let's be honest, fringe top 3 guys. Paulo Costa's gets, but if you look at Paulo Costa's wins, they're not. He lost to Israel Adesanya, he lost to Marvin Vettori, and then he beat Luke Rockhold, who was up at, I think, that was a Luke Rockhold who hadn't fought in
years. That was a retired Luke Rockhold coming back. Yeah,
he set out. Luke Rockhold when he felt obviously it was on the Usman Edwards card. The last time, Luke Rockhold fought in July of 2019, and then he fought in August of 2022. So he had 3 years out of the octagon, and notoriously chinny. Is what it is. He was up at altitude in Utah, and Paulo Costa couldn't finish Luke Rockhold. is a win over a guy who's 1-0 in the UFC next warranting a title shot? And the turnaround, I think, is too late for Paulo Costa anyway to face Izzy next in Australia. Let's be honest, that Australia card, I think it is in September, because then we've got the Abu Dhabi card in October. It's too late for Paulo Costa, unless he goes in there and blitzes through his opponent. He's only then got 1 month, August, essentially, to prepare for Israel Adesanya. It's not enough. And especially with the sort of work ethic that we see Paulo Costa put in, the shape he comes into fights against Marvin Vettori when he comes in at 200, he gets to fight the fight weight change 3 times in fight week. I'm worried that it'll be Sean Strickland in September, because we know that he can turn around in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, Somalia. Yeah, I think you might be right about that it is going to be Sean Strickland, because the UFC does reward these kind of people who are willing to show up. Donald Cerrone got tons of favors throughout his career. Angie Hill gets tons of favors throughout her career, because when the UFC phones, they say yes every single time. And maybe this is Sean Strickland building up years and years of goodwill. Maybe this is it. And you know what? One of the unfortunate things, and maybe it says more about the MMA community, is that Sean Strickland is, he is one of their actual like mid-tier stars. And isn't that just like a sad state of the UFC? If like people know who Sean Strickland is, like, oh my God.
People know who Sean Strickland is. They don't know who Grant Dawson is, who put on maybe the best performance. I know he didn't get the finish, but maybe the best performance of his career in the co-main event against Damir Ismagulov. Ismagulov he's a notoriously good fighter. He started his UFC career with 5 straight wins here. Then obviously when he's taken that kind of next step up, Arman Sarukian lost the fight. Grant Dawson now lost the fight. And Grant Dawson, I think he's a bit of a dark horse in the division. He's got good wrestling, he's got really solid striking, and he knows how to transition in between wrestling and striking. He's not a wrestler, he's not a striker, he's a mixed martial artist, which I think is really important. And this fight showed it. 3 takedowns, 30 total strikes to 13. 30 significant strikes to 13, 84 to 34, 12 and a half minutes control time. It's an absolute domination. And I think we've got a 10-8 in there as well, which we've got a 10-8 in there as well for that first round, which is just kind of shows the dominance that Grant Dawson showed.
Yeah, 2 wins in a row over Damir Ismagulov and Mark Madsen, the Olympic silver medalist in wrestling. And now he's just sitting in the top 10 now at lightweight. So it's nothing but challenge ahead in one of the more stacked divisions for Grant Dawson. Is it Arman Sarukian? Mateusz Gamrot? There's nothing but incredible matchups in this division. I think Rafael Fiziev is a little bit too far ahead in that division. Rafael dos Anjos is always sticking around, or he looks back and fights like a Jalen Turner or a Dan Hooker. Whatever the future holds, like, man, we're pumped for it. We're ready for it. This is a good one.
I'm here for the Grant Dawson train, and he's clever with his call-outs as well. He doesn't call out a specific name and waste the call-out. He said, look, I either want a name in like a Tony Ferguson, or I want a higher-ranked opponent.
Leave Tony Ferguson alone. Stop it. Does he book to fight?
He's booked to fight Bobby Green on the main card of 291, I believe. I saw this morning. I knew he's a main card fighter, questionable when you've got Wonder Boy on the prelims, but it's what it is. But Grant Dawson, I'm here for it, and I think he should be looking to fight the winner of, again, another fight that we'll go on to talk about, Hooker versus Turner this weekend. Mm-hmm. It just makes logical sense. He should be in no rush, Grant Dawson, to get to that upper end of the division, because we know that they're all killers. He's 28, 29 now. It's time that he sort of really made, his career is built in a very sensible way. He's undefeated in the UFC. He got the chance on the Contender Series. You look at some of the names, Nad Narimani, Leonardo Santos, Derek Minner, who obviously questionable, Mike Trizano, Julian Erosa. He drew with Ricky Glenn. Then he's beat Jared Gordon by finish, Mark Marston by finish, and now he dominates Ismagulov. He's a solid fighter all round, and I think he could be tough for someone like if he gets Fiziev to the ground. It could be a long night for Fiziev, but like you said, I think that's a step up a little bit too far at the moment. Yeah, like you say, he's looking for that name in a Tony Ferguson, or he's looking for a higher ranked opponent. Rafael dos Anjos, I think would make sense. He's, we've got a piece out on the site about gatekeeping at the moment. I think dos Anjos is the gatekeeper to the top 8 of the division, and I think that's a logical fight for Grant Dawson. I think dos Anjos is booked at the moment, but regardless, it's a sensible fight, should we say, for Grant Dawson to look at sort of getting himself in that upper echelon of the division.
Hey, how about the return of Kevin Lee? This was sad. Ooh, this was a bad one.
Yeah. All the talk going into it, I shouldn't be fighting in the Apex. I shouldn't be fighting behind closed doors. I should be fighting with fans. I think he's probably the happiest person that it is in the Apex, that it was in the Apex. He was getting, but even, it wasn't like a flash knock. Well, I mean, it wasn't like a flash knockdown and quick submission. That's exactly what it was. However, on the lead up to that, he's getting his head snapped back by the jab. A 1-2 landed on the shoulder once, and then the 1-2 landed and dropped him heavy. And then he got his neck snatched. I don't know for Kevin Lee. There was a time, when he fought Tony Ferguson, and when he was fighting
like Charles Oliveira. Yeah.
We really thought this is the guy, Is this the guy to he's a big guy. Is he the guy to clash with Khabib? He was in that conversation. Let's not forget.
Yeah, he was.
And it's just not gone. It's not gone the way. It's just not gone his way. It's simply put. I don't know what the problem is. His striking didn't look great in this fight. He, like I say, I know it only lasted 55 seconds. I think technically, it was probably, he was out after about 50 seconds, 52 seconds, and then the referee was trying to find Kevin Lee's arm to check that he was out. Officially it was 55, under a minute. Let's be honest.
Yeah. But
are we really that surprised? He's without a legitimate win since 2019 when he knocked out Gregor Gillespie. Yes, he beat Diego Sanchez, but come on, guys. Like, Diego Sanchez is 93 years old. He's got the body and the brain of a 193-year-old. Like,
yeah,
Diego Sanchez shouldn't have been in that fight, and he couldn't finish Diego Sanchez. Let's not forget, he couldn't finish Diego Sanchez. That was a catch weight at 165 as well.
Yeah, it's not great.
He had 2 wins together since 2017. He beat Edson Barboza and he beat Gregor Gillespie. I think luckily for Kevin Lee, he'll be known for that Gregor Gillespie knockout,
which was really good.
Stunning knockout that that's on anybody's highlight reel. What you won't see is the losses against Daniel Rodriguez when he was completely outthought and outworked. The loss against Charles Oliveira when he tried to claim that he didn't tap. This loss where he was beaten for 50 seconds and then tapped out. It was rough for Kevin Lee, and I don't know. The UFC clearly want to push Kevin Lee. With that being said, he was on the prelims this time, so are they kind of waking up to realize that maybe that he's not all he was cracked up to, or maybe he's not all the hype maybe sort of cracked up to be, as it were. Let's not forget he was dominating Tony Ferguson at one point in their fight for the interim title before he was caught in the triangle. That could have set up a huge fight with Khabib, and who knows how that would have gone. But hindsight in MMA is 2020. It didn't go his way, and it's pretty much just exclusively gone downhill for him since then, which is a shame because he's a captivating personality. I listened to him a good few years ago now on Rogan's podcast, and he's a good talker. He's clearly motivated. He's trying different. He's going out to TriStar. He's training at Extreme Couture. He's training in Las Vegas, but it's just not going his way. And maybe we try the Kevin Lee thing with someone that's not on a 20-fight winning run, perhaps.
Well, and that's the other side of this. As Rinat, we'll just call him. We actually don't know what the upper level is of this person. He's not currently top ranked in the top 15 in welterweight, but he very well could be. We might look back in 3 years and be like, holy crap, it was unfair that Kevin Lee was ever in a fight with this guy who's now this, this world killer, top 3 welterweight. It very well could be that he is that good. We didn't know much about him. So it may be Kevin Lee is in the right place still, and he's just always going to be a middling fighter. I like the moves that he was making of outside the UFC, spending time, just getting more cage time because he's young. He's only 30 years old. You could arguably say he's a few years away from his prime, but just the way that he's looked, his record against who it is, sometimes he just drops the ball. He should have been beating Ally Akinta. He should have been beating Rafael Dos Anjos. Like, these are winnable fights for him. It's just unfortunate to see. I do think he needs some time away. Just a break. Get out there. Give your brain a rest. I don't know what the future of Kevin Lee holds. If he retired, I wouldn't say that's unjustified, right?
No, exactly. And I think for me, Kevin Lee needs to go full Ben Askren, and just from minute one run across the octagon and wrestle his opponents, because he's got a solid wrestling game.
Yeah, he does.
He arguably doesn't have the gas tank. We've seen him gas many times.
Yes.
He's just the problem is he's a big guy. He's got a lot of muscle mass, so that lactic acid builds up very quickly in his muscles and whatnot. But also, he's a talker, and as soon as you start being a talker, as soon as you start trash talking people, people are either going to love you or hate you. And if you're not winning, it doesn't look great. We're reflecting on Conor McGregor's comments against Khabib. Then he got beaten pretty badly. It's not a good look.
Yeah.
Kevin Lee, like I say, he's a talker. He walks out to the middle of the octagon, spreads his arms out wide, sort of. He's got the head tattoo and everything, and he doesn't quite back it up. It's disappointing, but no, I completely agree. If he was to retire, I think he could retire saying, I had a good career. I had a shot at the gold, didn't quite make it against, an in his prime Tony Ferguson. I think he's got to be pretty good at looking at how Tony's career has gone since that fight, as to, did I get the last good Tony? Is that Tony's last win? I can't remember. But maybe
beat Pettis and then Cerrone. So
beat Pettis and So and both of those were corner stoppages. I think Kevin Lee is probably looking at the way that Tony Ferguson's career has gone since their fight, and sort of maybe kicking himself that he just couldn't get that version of Tony in that title fight. Because then, like I say, who knows what would have happened? But
we could talk about the Tony and Khabib saga for so long. About, like, man, it is actually so sad looking back and how many times it was booked, and every time it was booked for like a bigger spot. One time it was like a finale, then there was a Fight Night main event, and then it was an interim, and then it was the undisputed. Like, oh my god, how did we never get this fight? In hindsight, I think you get Khabib winning by various degrees of dominance. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the ways in which it was, the fight was cancelled. Tony tripped over a wire and blew his knee out. Khabib was eating tiramisu on an Instagram picture, and then failed. He had weight cutting issues. It's
so funny.
It's comical if it wasn't such a good and potentially great fight. But because it was such a good and potentially great fight, that one cuts deep. But I agree. Yes. I think the way their careers have gone, I think Khabib would have just ran through him with relative ease.
Yeah, I agree with you. Anyway, what else do we got?
I think we've got the only really thing to talk about is Ruziboev making his middleweight debut, humongous for the weight class. Goes in there. I think it was a short notice fight. Smashes through his opponent. Shouldn't. I don't. How he makes 185. Someone check those scales. He is massive, and he's really experienced. He's got, I think, 40 fights. And it's his first fight in the UFC.
6'5". He's at 185. And he's not young. It's not like he's growing into his frame.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And performance of the night: 1 minute 17 second win. I mean, the guy is, and then this is against a guy in Bruno Ferreira who just was coming off a knockout win over RoboCop Gregory Rodriguez. Like, this is some guy, and put him in the main event next. He looked more impressive than Magomedov. I can't touch on the main event again, but even if Magomedov would have won that first fight after 3 minutes, at least we learned something. We learned absolutely nothing from Magomedov in his first fight. And I'd be intrigued to see where he is placed on the card next, because I know we're going back and we'll go on to UFC 290 in a second, but Magomedov, one fight in the UFC. I'm not even sure if that was on the main card of it was Gane versus Tuivasa in Paris.
Mhm.
It was nowhere near the main card. It was very much on the prelims. He then gets the chance in the main event. Now, can the UFC in their own head sort of admit, yeah, we fucked up. He's going to go back down the prelims. Are they going to keep him on the main card of a fight night? Who knows at this point? But it's just not a good look. But UFC 290, that's enough with the negativity. UFC 290, International Fight Week.
It's looking good. We got all sorts of good stuff on the card. What do you want to start? Maybe start at the top and work down?
By all means, yeah. Phenomenal, undisputed featherweight title, pound for pound number one, Alexander Volkanovski versus a very exciting contender and a new face for Volkanovski, which is refreshing. There was talks of the Islam Makhachev rematch. I didn't want to see that straight away. I know it was an extremely close fight at 155, but I didn't want to see that straight away because he faces Max Holloway 3 times. He has to fight in there against Zombie. Then he has to fight against Makhachev. Then he maybe fights Makhachev again. In 6 fights, he's fighting 3 people. That doesn't quite work for me. Yair Rodriguez is a live game opponent. We saw how good he looked against Josh Emmett. We've seen him not look so good against, the likes of Frankie Edgar back in the day. He's obviously pretty much losing that fight against Zombie before he did the crazy sort of back elbow, shoulder, arm, wrist knockout thing. I still don't know what happened, and I've watched it thousands of times. But, you're only as good as your last fight. Volkanovski lost his last fight, albeit narrowly, and Yair Rodriguez dominated his last fight against Josh Emmett. This for me is, I haven't seen an awful lot of hype about it, to be honest, but to sit atop the International Fight Week, and let's be honest, International Fight Week, you've got an Australian facing a Mexican. That makes a lot of sense. You're getting Australian fans in, you're getting the Mexican fans in, especially with the co-main event as well. Tim, go. What's your analysis? Because I always love your sort of breakdowns of the fight.
Yeah, I mean, I love to see Yair in this position because he was on the outs with the UFC for a few times, but he was also very pushed.
He was from the UFC at one point, if we're not facing Magomed Sharapov, if you remember.
Yeah, I remember well because it was unfortunate that we also had this kid has so much potential, and it seems like he's kind of putting it together now in his last couple of fights. With Alexander Volkanovski watching tape, we try to put fighters into boxes. So I'll give you some examples: aggressive versus counter striker, inside versus outside, a freestyle versus system fighter, a grappler versus striker, southpaw versus orthodox. In a weird way, Volkanovski is one of the toughest fighters to put in boxes because you could put him in every single one of those. He is southpaw versus orthodox. He is freestyle versus system. He is aggressive and a counter striker. He is an inside and outside striker. He is such a good fighter. This is why all the analysis around him, coming from very intelligent people, are saying things like, yeah, if you put this guy in any era in MMA history, in any weight class with that skill set, he is pound for pound one of the great fighters in this sport's history. He is just so good everywhere. Whereas Yair is very much a freestyle outside kicking fighter. He's very easy to label, but he's dangerous from every position, whether he's on his back, whether you're at distance, whether you're at range from him. He's also a never quit fighter. He's gotten finishes deep in the 5th round. He mixes kicks with his punches very well because he was even landing head kicks on a person as skilled as Max Holloway. I think the biggest improvements that we saw in the Josh Emmett fight, while he is a little bit hittable, he circles out really well. So he's got improved footwork and cage movement. So that's some of the few ideas and analysis. Matt, Frazer, where do you land? Where do you think?
Yeah, I completely, I think that's a brilliant breakdown of Volkanovski. Is just, there's a reason why he's pound for pound number one mixed martial artist. He's not the pound for pound number one kickboxer. He's not the pound for pound number one wrestler. He's the pound for pound number one mixed martial artist on the planet because he is so well rounded. You don't beat Max Holloway 3 times by not being well rounded. You don't beat, you don't go 25 minutes with Makhachev and narrowly. Let's not forget that was a very close fight. And I'm going to go back and watch it today, and I'm going to go back and watch Yair Rodriguez's fight against Josh Emmett today, because I'm interested to see how Volkanovski wins this one. If of course he does, I am picking Volkanovski. I think he's, like you say, maybe one of the greatest of all time, let alone in the featherweight division.
Yep.
I put an article out this week of greatest Australian MMA fighters today. There's only one. There's only one who's ever at the top of that list. We've got Robert Whittaker, of course. And we've got a couple of other guys and girls on that list. But there's only one that's ever going to sit at the top of that list at the moment. And likewise, I've got a piece coming out probably tomorrow, of just ranking every single one of Alexander Volkanovski's UFC wins. There are some really good wins. And, a little bit of a spoiler, the Jose Aldo win doesn't make the top 5 for me, because there are so many more phenomenal wins on Alexander Volkanovski's record. But I think in this one, this is going to be one of his toughest fights. And we're not just saying that to try and hype the fight up. I don't think it needs it, us to tell you how good this fight's going to be. But Alexander Volkanovski, for me, has to go back to old Volkanovski, where he's mixing in plenty of takedowns. If we look at his fight, the first fight, 3 takedowns. Second fight, 4 takedowns. Third fight, 5 takedowns. Then Chad Mendes didn't land a single takedown. Jose Aldo didn't land a single takedown. Max Holloway didn't land a single takedown. Brian Ortega didn't land a single takedown. Max Holloway, 3, arguably his best performance, didn't land a single takedown. Islam Makhachev, of course, you're looking at defensively wrestling. But I want to see Volkanovski mix the martial arts. Like you alluded to there, he's not a striker, he's not a grappler, he's a mixed martial artist, and I think he needs to do that against Yair. But he also, like you say, Yair is one of the best guys off his back that we've seen. We saw against Brian Ortega. Yes, that one ended in an injury, but he was setting stuff up from his back. I think he realized the hole in his game when he lost to Frankie Edgar. I think that was at Madison Square Garden's debut. I've got a problem fighting off my back, so for the next 10 weeks, I'm just going to go into training. I'm going to go on my back. I'm going to get a host of different guys just to sit in my guard. And I'm going to try and throw up attacks. I'm going to try and get back to my feet. I'm going to try and land damage. And it's worked. We saw against that victory against Josh Emmett. It's a triangle choke, but from the bottom. This isn't a guy that you can take down and just sort of chill out and relax in his guard, because he's going to be throwing. He's long-limbed as well. He's going to be throwing up triangles, as we saw against Josh Emmett. He's going to be throwing up arm bars like we saw against Brian Ortega, shoulder locks and whatnot. He's a very good, like you say, defensive grappler. When he gets taken down, his takedown defense, to be honest, isn't great. It's 63% takedown defense, and to his credit, a lot of people tried to take him down because he's so good on the feet. No one wants to stand with Yair Rodriguez because of how good he is on the feet. We just look at the he's 5 inches taller than Volkanovski, but they've got the same reach. They've got the same reach, yes. So in theory, he shouldn't be able to keep Volkanovski on the outside. But being 5 inches taller as well, that's got to come somewhere. Is it his body? Is it his legs? I'm not quite sure. But although they've got the same reach, Yair is going to look like the bigger, longer guy in there. And that sort of, that extended height, but that bigger frame of his means that from the bottom, he can throw up triangles with his legs a lot more easy. He can reach under and get an underhook under Volkanovski's leg if Volkanovski takes him down, because he's got just, I know it sounds simplistic, but he's got more body in comparison to Volkanovski. It's as simple as that. And I think, like I say, I think Volkanovski does have to mix the martial arts in this one, really look to, slam the leg kick, slow Yair Rodriguez down. We know how good he is at leg kicking, Volkanovski, but he can't just rely on trying to outstrike Yair. He has to keep Yair Rodriguez guessing, because Yair Rodriguez, we've seen him throw spinning wheel kicks, flying knees. Pretty much, we've seen him throw every attack there is. He needs to be the one to keep Yair Rodriguez guessing, rather than Yair Rodriguez keeping Volkanovski guessing. I can see this being a 25-minute chess match. I don't see a finish in this one. I see Volkanovski getting his hand raised, but I don't think it's going to be as dominant as Max Holloway 3. But I said that going into the trilogy with Max Holloway, and look what happened. He could just surprise us all by just going out there, outstriking Rodriguez and just cementing himself as the pound-for-pound number one, which, he is. This is the pound-for-pound number one fighter fighting on International Fight Week. It's a brilliant move from the UFC.
Yeah, and even looking at past International Fight Weeks, this is one of the stronger offerings from them, so that's great. Appreciate that. But yeah, Alexander Volkanovski, I could see Volkanovski like almost getting in at the wrong time, having the wrong timing on his entry or something like that, and getting hit in the head, getting a head kick absorbed and starting to stumble. But overall, while Yair is dangerous, powerful striker, his defensive striking leaves a little bit to be desired, in that even Josh Emmett managed to hit him a couple times significantly. His kick game, this is the thing where we get into kick range. Your kicks may betray you, because when you're kicking, you're no longer moving. You have to have one foot planted on the ground. And against a great mover, a person who moves in and out very well, your kick game may actually betray you. I fear for Yair Rodriguez that his highest skills, his best skills in this fight may work against him a little bit. So overall, and like you said, the submission's off his back. Trying to submit Alexander Volkanovski is like trying to submit literally a brick wall. This is a very tall order and a very tough call for Yair Rodriguez to overcome. I am actually going to say a TKO victory for Alexander Volkanovski is my final pick for you.
I do think he has to put on a statement. Let's not forget, this is the first time since, I think, 2013 that he's coming off a loss. And that's a narrow loss. And that arguably means that, look, he's not going to leave it in the judges' hands again. You know, he probably thought that he won that Makhachev fight. And obviously the judges said that he didn't. So we could see a much more aggressive Volkanovski in this one, looking to say, look, I thought I won the last one. I left it in the judges' hands. I didn't win. I didn't get my hand raised. I'm not leaving it in the judges' hands again. So a TKO, I am picking Volkanovski by decision, because I think Yair Rodriguez is a good enough mover, if he is hurt, to be able to get out of the way. You know, he can use those long limbs to grapple with Volkanovski and kind of nullify Volkanovski's game. But I don't think a TKO is a bad shout at all, because, like I say, I think he's going to probably come with he's going to be a little bit pissed off, I think, having lost the last fight. And you know, he's going to look to put on a statement. This is the first time we're seeing, like I say, Volkanovski come off a loss. How does he react from that? That's what makes great champions. I know it was up at 155, but, you know, we've seen Yair Rodriguez come off a loss to Max Holloway, and he didn't really bounce back against Brian Ortega, because that fight was a bit of a nothing fight, really. We've seen him come off the loss against Frankie Edgar, and I can't remember what his fight after that was, but I know it's definitely a win. So, that was the Chan Sung Young fight. The Korean Zombie fight. We obviously had the no contest against Jeremy Stephens, the eye poke, and then he came back and just dominated Jeremy Stephens. You know, how does Volkanovski react to the loss? A TKO could be a great shout.
What do you think of Ilia Topuria next? Undefeated in MMA. This guy is 110% effort throughout the fight. He's a smart fighter. He can really pace himself when he needs to. He can see things coming really well. He can counter strike really well. This gets me excited. This is one of those, you know, an Ilia Topuria versus Alexander Volkanovski is a get me out of bed in the morning kind of fight. You know what I mean?
100%. And I want Ilia Topuria to be there ringside saying, I don't care. Well, I think Ilia Topuria deep down is hoping that it's Volkanovski, because if Yair Rodriguez wins, Volkanovski is getting a rematch.
Yes.
100%. If Volkanovski wins and wants to stay at feather, it's Ilia Topuria next. There's you know, even if Max Holloway beats Zombie, is there much call for a fourth fight? I'm personally not interested. Even though Max is coming off that dominant win against Arnold Allen, if he dominates Zombie as well, Max Holloway is in a horrible position at the moment, where he's lost 3 times to the champion, each more dominant than the last.
Yes.
It is. But then if it's a massive if Volkanovski stays at heavyweight, feather heavyweight, that's old Volkanovski at heavyweight.
Yeah, that's right.
If he stays at featherweight, we've seen him now at lightweight. He didn't look fleshy. He looked strong at lightweight. He defended plenty of takedowns from the best takedown artists in the lightweight division. Mm-hmm. Ilia Topuria is going to be hoping and praying that it is Volkanovski that wins, and he should be ringside, octagon side, and he should be calling for that fight, just like Sean O'Malley did against Aljamain Sterling. And look what happened: Sean O'Malley versus Aljamain Sterling in Boston. It works to be ringside. Yes, it doesn't always work. Brock Lesnar, Daniel Cormier, but you know, Lesnar is what he is. But you know, we've seen it. Sean O'Malley getting in the octagon, calling for the title shot, and it worked. He got the title shot. Ilia Topuria is the logical next contender at featherweight. There's nobody else, in my opinion.
Do you think they could rebook Brock versus DC for UFC 300? Like, both guys are not in shape, but it's not like they pulled Brock out of retirement for UFC 200.
I really hope not. I think Ronda Rousey, but
Yeah, me too.
word on the street is that she's leaving the WWE after SummerSlam, but
Yep.
we'll wait for the UFC 300 chat next year. We'll still be here, of course. And
Yeah.
more to the point, we'll wait for the Ronda Rousey chat because I released an article a couple of weeks ago. Do we not appreciate Ronda Rousey for her impact on the sport?
Oh my God.
I know I wrote it, but quite an interesting read. But we'll
link will be down below for that. But no, we don't appreciate Ronda nearly enough. Like all of this stuff. We even have like you can go to Tokyo or you can go to Bangkok and you'll have women headlining cards. That didn't happen before Ronda. The effect even internationally has been unfounded, unprecedented, right?
Exactly. And realistically, would it be the strangest thing if for the 30th anniversary event in November, we haven't got a headline yet. It's not going to be Conor McGregor because he's juiced up to the eyeballs.
You know, it's not going to
be. It's probably going to be Brock Lesnar. But would it be the craziest thing to have a Holly Holm versus Ronda Rousey rematch for the vacant bantamweight title?
No, it wouldn't be crazy.
And I'd watch the shit out of that. But
you know, and Ronda's not getting any younger, but you could almost argue that the division has not gotten much better. Like Juliana Pena, Raquel Pennington, and Holly Holm are your top three. You could argue that Ronda, with her skill set that she had back in the day, would be champion in that division. She was getting beat by like a very prime Holly Holm, Amanda Nunes. She could come back now a little bit out of shape and she would still be in the conversation, right?
I think she beats Juliana Pena. I think their striking is pretty similar. It's pretty amateurish. But
yeah.
Ronda's grappling is, without a shadow of a doubt, much better. Raquel Pennington, I don't think is fit to lace the boots of Ronda Rousey, especially historically. Holly Holm would be an entertaining fight because Holm has lent much more on the grappling in the sort of latter stage of her career. Would she do that against Ronda again, or would she look to be the matador like she was in Australia all those years ago? I think that was 193. So, you know, it could be 100 UFC pay-per-views later. Could we see the rematch? I'd be all over it. Fuck it, get Miesha Tate back. Why not?
She's trying. Didn't she just have I think she had a loss and then a child. But she's trying. Miesha knows that the division is weak. They need a leader in the division.
Not stupid. She even went down to flyweight to face Laura Murphy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right too. I'll get Miesha back.
Co-main event, UFC 290 co-main event. Another international fight week co-main event featuring international stars. Featuring a highly competitive fight between, I think this is technically, if we're being technical, it's the third time these guys have stood across each other. They stood across each other in the clubhouse. They've obviously stood across each other just in the sort of average run-of-the-mill UFC. And now they'll stand across each other, but this time there'll be gold on the line. Brandon Moreno versus Alexandre Pantoja or Pantoja. Rematch of their 2018 fight, which, I mean, if you look at Brandon Moreno's trajectory since then, you know, he lost to Sergio Pettis, he lost to Pantoja, he lost to Askar Askarov. He beat Kai Kara of France, he beat Jussier Formiga, he beat Brandon Royval, drew Figueiredo, beat Figueiredo, lost to Figueiredo, beat Kai Kara of France, beat Figueiredo. This guy has had, he's had a movie career, as it were. You know, Pantoja essentially kicked Brandon Moreno out of the UFC. Yes. He was cut after that. He then comes back after one fight in LFA, draws with Askar Askarov, and then goes on this crazy championship run. Like I say, it's movie stuff for Brandon Moreno, and I don't think it finishes at UFC 290. I think he gets the victory, but this fight is a really good fight. It's a really good fight. It's a highly competitive fight, which is not something that we can always say when they sort of shoehorn in another contender to the flyweight division. You know, a la Ray Borg, Tim Elliott, no disrespect, but that was never going to be competitive when those guys faced DJ. This is a highly competitive fight again, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that they fought twice before. Alexandre Pantoja has won both times, and coming into the third fight, the honest truth is that Brandon Moreno had not yet developed into the final form that he would eventually be. The underdeveloped jab that he had is nothing like the developed jab that he has now, or the entire repertoire of jabs that he has in his toolbox at this point. I mean, Brandon Moreno's the champ. His TKO wins over Davison Figueiredo and Kai Kara France. That's insane considering where he was before. A guy who could barely do anything, like a guy losing on tough to being a TKO champion. Alexandre Pantoja is coming off major wins out against Alex Perez, Brandon Royval, Manel Cape. It's really tough to say. I almost like Pantoja still in this matchup. He mixes strikes and takedowns really, really well. What makes him so dangerous is that he builds off of strikes. So he'll land a jab. Next time he tries, a jab, 1-2. And then he'll build off of that and do a jab, 1-2 into something else. He's always building off what he last did. And he's an aggressive forward fighter. Whether he's going for a jab into a combo, whether he's going for a takedown, he's always exciting. He's quite a good top position grappler as well, who sets a high pace. There's not a bad pick in this fight. I'm not going to disagree with anyone based on what they pick, but I'm almost getting the feeling I think this is Pantoja's night. I think this is his coming out party here.
I tend to agree with you. He's a much better finisher, despite the fact, like you say, Moreno's a TKO champion, as it were.
Yeah.
If you look at Pantoja's last sort of 5 fights, last 6 fights, or last 6 wins, sorry. Rear naked choke against Alex Perez, rear naked choke against Brandon Royval. Yeah, he went to decision with Manel Cape, but that's nothing to be, scoffed at.
It's a good fighter.
Overhand right of Matt Schnell, who we know is notoriously difficult to finish. Finish of Wilson Hayes, finish of Ulka Sakakai.
Mm-hmm.
He's a finisher in a division that isn't typically known for finishers. We've got Brandon Moreno, who finished Figueiredo by rear naked choke and then had the TKO eye injury last time out. Figueiredo is obviously heavy-handed, but maybe to his downfall. Pantoja is a fantastic fighter, and I think he's going to look to get. I think the first 2 rounds maybe he gets stung badly with that jab of Brandon Moreno. He probably fails on a couple of takedowns, but how long can Moreno? We saw Moreno scrambling really well against Figueiredo, managing to get top position after being taken down. How much is Moreno going to risk it? 'Cause yes, the takedown threat was there from Figueiredo, but I don't think the ground game threat was there for Figueiredo as much as it is against Pantoja.
Mm-hmm.
But, like you said, Pantoja, it must be a nightmare to deal with him because he goes for the jab and you get hit with a jab, okay. And he goes for the jab again, you get hit with it again, but then you get hit with the right hand behind it. Then you go for the jab again and suddenly you're on your back.
Yeah.
You go for the jab again, but then you get leg kicked. It's everything, like you say, everything is, he sets it up, he goes 1, and then the second layer, and then the third layer, and then the 4th. Yeah. But everything comes off the jab. If you can get out of the way of that jab, that's not to say there's not a high kick coming around the side next time out. I think Moreno, his easiest way to victory would be to take Pantoja down and look to dominate him off the top. With that being said, I don't think that's not going to be an easy feat to dominate, in top position. I just think I really don't know who I'm going to pick in this one because, suggestion would be that it's Moreno's. He's faced the higher opposition, Kai Kara France, Davison Figueiredo 20 times. Askarov he's gone the distance with. But then you look at Pantoja, Brandon Royval, really good win. Alex Perez, pretty decent win. It's a difficult sell for Moreno to bounce back from, and then, even then they'll only be technically 1-1. I could see this fight going to a trilogy if Moreno wins, but yeah, it's a fantastic fight, and it's one of those that you're going to be on the edge of your seat because it's going to be all action. Flyweights always are, and it's going to be a tight fight, and it's going to be, I think, maybe a big shot will steal a round for Pantoja, or a big shot or a big takedown for Moreno, or a big takedown for Pantoja will steal the round and obviously get sort of bank around, rather than it being a clear, okay, Moreno absolutely dominated that round. It's going to be tight, it's going to be technical. I think we could even have a little bit of a discussion this time next week on did Brandon Moreno really win that fight? How did you score that round? How did you score this round? I don't see a finish coming because I think 2 guys are a little bit too savvy. But I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, watching tape almost makes it harder to make a pick, and that's why I just say, yeah, I have a feeling. Not based on anything, not based on technical analysis, and I'm willing to admit that. No, seems like Pantoja, but this is a coin flip kind of fight. Love it.
Exactly, and I completely agree with you. So we've got, I don't know if, I'm assuming Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis is the next fight on the card, although Tapology has it being Bo Nickel. But we'll talk about Whittaker Dricus du Plessis first.
Yeah.
It's the number one contender fight, really. It's a huge step up for Dricus, in my opinion. And if Whittaker can win, it's hard to deny him another shot at Israel Adesanya. What I would say is that I'm excited to see how Dricus fight. He's a reckless fighter against a fighter who is traditionally not reckless. Yes, Robert Whittaker is reckless in that first fight with Israel Adesanya, but traditionally he's not that guy. Dricus du Plessis, he had the nose surgery, so will we see him blowing? Is he all talk that the only reason that he used to mouth breathe was because he had a nose injury? Potentially. How did Dricus beat Robert Whittaker? I don't know, because he doesn't outstrike him, in my opinion. I don't think he'll be able to out wrestle him. So how does he beat him? In a way, look, I'm a massive Robert Whittaker fan. I want Robert Whittaker to win the fight. I also want Dricus to win the fight because it's a fresh face. It's a big rivalry against Izzy. But it's also, keeps the division fresh if du Plessis wins. I just don't know how he's going to win, because I just think Robert Whittaker, he hasn't lost to anyone not called Israel Adesanya since 2014. I think he's the best middleweight on the planet, not nicknamed Last Stylebender. Without if Izzy didn't exist, Robert Whittaker's been the champion for many a year. Even with the Alex Pereira coming into the picture, I think he would have beat Alex Pereira fairly comfortably. And I think, again, like we said in the main event, I think he mixes the martial arts in this one. Looks to wrestle du Plessis a little bit, like he did against Darren Till. Looks to wrestle him a little bit, looks to strike with him a little bit, feel him out for that first. And let's not forget, again, this is a 3-round fight for Robert Whittaker, who has looked phenomenal in 3-round fights in recent times. He beat Martin Vettori across 3 rounds I think that was in France. He beat Calvin Gaston across 5. He beat Darren Till across 5, beat Jared Cannonier across 3 minutes and broke Cannonier's arm. If you remember that, he absolutely battered him. So this is a 3-round fight. It's almost like a 3-round sprint for Robert Whittaker, and I think he dominates it.
Yeah, du Plessis is one of those weird ones where I don't know that there has ever been a fighter more betrayed by his resume, in terms of his resume does not indicate his level of skill. Like, Derek Brunson was not motivated in that fight. He was gassed and then retired. Darren Till, even with a guy with very little ground game, still had moments in the fight, kind of thing. I don't know. It's just such a weird thing of, like, this guy looking at his resume, you think, this is where he deserves to be. Knowing how he fights, it's such an odd thing, because he's not that good. His resume betrays him. Of course, Robert Whittaker should win, unless Robert Whittaker is suddenly a very old man, which it's entirely possible. This should be an easy win for Robert Whittaker, right?
100%. It's almost like we don't need to talk about it, because what can we add that the history and the record don't show? That Dricus is not a great fighter.
Not really, no.
I don't mind the guy. I think the whole race thing with Israel Adesanya is a bit, I don't like that kind of shit in MMA, but it is what it is. If he wants to go down that route to try and get a fight, it's not how I'd go about it, but it is what it is. But I don't mind him as a fighter. I don't mind him as a talker. I've watched some interviews with him. He comes across all right, but
yeah, he does. Yeah,
he's just not a great fighter. Whereas Robert Whittaker comes across great in interviews and is a phenomenal fighter, and I think that skill will show in this one. I really think, I don't know if he gets a finish, because Dricus he's a big guy, and Robert, let's not forget, was a welterweight. Dricus du Plessis can make welterweight. He's chopping off a leg to make 170.
Yeah,
and I know it's a long time since we've seen Robert Whittaker make welterweight, but he could at one point get down there. I don't think he finishes him. I just think he batters him like he did Marvin Vettori in France last time out.
Yeah, I co-sign with that. Let's move on.
Bo Nickel. My notes. Gore's going to get WrestleFox for as long as it lasts. Despite having 51% takedown defense, he'll be on his back within a minute.
Yeah,
That's
the UFC knows what.
But I don't get it. I don't understand it. I do not understand it. And let's be honest, Trezor Gore, I think, was he not he's 4-2, and he was the tough finalist. You obviously kind of want to show that you know, tough is what it. I think this season of tough is pointless with McGregor and Chandler. McGregor doesn't care. McGregor's lost. I think he's 0-6 now. And believe it or not, guys that have been in the UFC, some guys that were in the UFC this time last year, are better than guys not in the UFC. Well,
I know. Yeah.
Learning about tough. Now you're putting in a tough finalist against a guy who, you know, Bo Nickel's 4-0, Trezor Gore 4-2. Logically, it's like, yeah, it's a pretty fair fight, but combat sports wise, it's not a fair fight. I just don't understand it. I just really don't get this fight. I'll watch it because it'll be the fight will be over within 5 minutes. And I'm willing to sit here next week and say, hands up, Trezor Gore, I apologize. You went out there and you absolutely killed Bo Nickel. It's not going to happen. There's a reason that Bo Nickel is on his second main card in as many fights. I'm not interested. I know until he gets a win or until he gets an opponent that presents some danger, presents a question, then I'll be all in on Bo Nickel. But until that moment, you know, Jamie Pickett, yeah, not a bad first opponent. Now you've got to take that step up. If you're you know, talking about Israel Adesanya in interviews, you need to take a big step up in competition. And unfortunately, Trezor Gore for me isn't that step up in competition.
Yeah, the thing is, I do like someone at Bo Nickel's level in MMA taking his time and developing a little bit more. I think that's the right move. It just looks bad when it's on a UFC main card kind of thing. Like, you look at this booking, it's like you said, we know what's going on here. If you have a parlay, like, add Bo Nickel to it just for a bonus, because you know it's an easy win here for him. Exactly. Don't love to see it on a UFC main card, but I don't know, if he was in LFA or anything like that, he'd be blowing guys out of the water kind of thing. Like, he's a very good fighter. I don't know. I do think that he should be in an LFA or something like that.
Because you've got guys outside of the UFC or guys that have been cut from the UFC that, I mean, you've got guys on this card. I know it's a late notice opponent, but Jack Della Maddalena was supposed to be fighting Sean Brady on this card.
That's a great fight. Really great fight.
That was on the prelim. You've got, you know, I've got just notes on some of the guys. Tatsuro Tiara, probably butchered it. He's going to steal the show, in my opinion. 13-0 at 23 years old. He's opening up the card. He's already 3-0 in the UFC. He has more of a call to be on the main card than Bo Nickel. Cameron Saman, obviously teammate of Dricus du Plessis, undefeated 8-0, 2-0 in the UFC thus far. Really exciting fight. Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menafield. The rematch. The first one was fun. This one's going to be just as fun. It's going to beat the shit out of each other. Put that on the main card. Now, I'm going to butcher this name, but bear with me. Yasmin Jayargui? I don't know. But her UFC debut was on the main card, which is fine. Obviously, the UFC want to push her. She's 10-0. I'm excited to see her take the next step up. And, of course, we've got the retirement fight of one Robbie Lawler, who, you know, we'll talk about his career on next week's show as we break down UFC 290. But, you know, we've also got on the main card, we've got Hooker versus Gamrot. Hooker versus Jalen Turner. Yeah. It was meant to be Hooker versus Turner, and then Turner faced Gamrot on late notice. You're essentially saying that Bo Nickel versus Trezor Gore is as good a fight as Hooker versus Turner. It's not. It's not. Hooker versus Turner is not going the distance. Hooker's looking to put 2 wins together for the first time since 2020, and Jalen Turner's looking to bounce back from the loss to Mateus Gamrot, as I alluded to earlier. It's not going the distance, but you're essentially saying that fight is as good as Trezor Gore versus Bo Nickel because they're both on the main card. Sorry, no.
Yeah, it's a weird.
Will be missed. If you miss Bo Nickel's fight, spoiler, he wins.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird decision. I wouldn't have booked it that way. This is not where I think Bo Nickel should be. However, let's move forward. Dan Hooker's back is against the wall. He's got to win. He has to win, right?
Of course. He put on obviously that good win last time out against
some guy.
Relez, is it? But it's quite easy to look good at a guy who's flip flopping like a fish out of water, trying to go for your legs, and when he doesn't get your legs, he hasn't got a plan B.
Yeah.
His plan A works 1 in every 5 fights, and his plan B is non-existent. Like you said, his back is up against the wall now. It was certainly up against the wall last time out in New York.
Mm-hmm.
What I am excited to see is it's a massive step up in competition. You know, the guys that he's faced, he went on that run where he beat James Vick, beat Al Quinto, and had that war with Paul Felder. Then he lost to Dustin Poirier in another war. Then he got TKO by Michael Chandler. Then he bounced back in a strange fight against Nasrat Haqparast, which is a big step down in my opinion. Then he's in there with Islam Makhachev a month later. Strange for me. Strange career decision. Then he's sort of, excuse me. Then he sort of, you know, tries to roll the dice going back down to featherweight against Arnold Allen in London. Gets blown out of the water in the first round. Don't get me wrong, that loss has kind of aged well because we know how good Arnold Allen is now. But you don't really want to be doing that if you're Dan Hooker, because he's not getting any younger. 33 years old. He's probably got, you know, a couple of fights left in him with the way that he fights. Then he bounces back against Claudio Puelles, but it's a humongous step up in competition to fight Jalen Turner, who is he's not going to flip flop on the ground like Puelles. Don't get me wrong, you might look to take it to the ground because he's solid on the ground. But if not, he'll stand and bang with you. He's a long guy for the division. Dan Hooker's 6 foot. I think Jalen Turner's considerably taller than that. I think he's 6'2", 6'3". So he's 6'3" at lightweight. You know, we were talking about
yeah,
Ruzibayev earlier, 6'5" middleweight. He's 6'3" lightweight. So he'll be able to keep Dan Hooker, you know, guessing both on the feet and both on the feet and on the floor. But this is a really exciting fight. This is a main card fight. This is a fight night main event in front of fans.
Yeah, it is.
Been treated to it being on the main card, but you know, I'm excited for this one. It's probably, you know, there's that main card is probably, you know, give or take the Bo Nickel fight, is probably the best main card of the year so far, in my opinion, as far as competitive fights that make sense.
It's a great fight. Tune it in for that one. But it's crazy to think that a 33-year-old at lightweight might as well be like the grandfather of the division. He's an ancient man for this weight class. If you're not in the top 5 at age 33 at lightweight, it's such a tough one. I'll throw in for Jalen Turner here. I think he's probably going to win via submission. I think he's going to control this fight. Maybe I'm wrong here, but stop me when I'm wrong. You know, what do you think? What do you make of it?
No, I completely agree. I think Jalen Turner there's a clear way to victory, and it's via submission. Dan Hooker's always struggled in the submission game. He maybe even drops Dan Hooker, similar to Kevin Lee, you know, gets dropped and then gets finished. But, you know, I think that's a really good fight. And, you know, I don't get the Jack Della Maddalena fight. It's a shame that Sean Brady's dropped off. I'm very, very happy that JDM is staying on the card because he's one of my favourite fighters to watch. He's all action wherever it goes.
Yeah.
They've signed a debutant to face him. I think he's 7-0.
Yeah. Apparently he's quite good as well. I don't have the authority to offer that information. But yeah.
Jack Della Maddalena is going to be competing for a championship within the next 2 years. He's probably not that good. He's 7-0, so he's better than the first 7 guys that he's faced. And who knows what happened. But Jack Della Maddalena is one of the best fighters at welterweight, regardless of, you know, ranking. I do think that he could. I think if you put him in even now with the top 5 of the division, he doesn't massively struggle. I think if you put him in with Leon Edwards now, it's not a complete. I think Leon Edwards runs through him, but it's not a completely one-sided fight. There would be an argument for Jack Della Maddalena to do well against Leon Edwards at this point in his career. So to have him facing a debutant is a little bit disappointing, especially after Kevin Holland, Joaquin Buckley, Chris Curtis, all these guys came out and said, you know, he's put the call out to any welterweights or middleweights. I'll put my hand up, I'll face him. And to not go that way and to sign a debut, it's a little bit disappointing. You can't tell me there's no 170 or no one in the realm of 170 or 185 willing to fight in International Fight Week on short notice. I don't buy that, but you know, he'll add to his UFC record, I imagine, probably by TKO in the first round. So
yeah, co-sign with that. I major agree. It is disappointing that we didn't get like a fun Chris Curtis fight or something like that. You know what makes it even worse? Josiah Harrell may be making his debut in the UFC. He has fought at 170 pounds once in his entire career. He is actually a lightweight fighter. So it's even worse than we initially thought. I mean, it's not great.
It is what it is, but we can't, you know,
what it is.
Like I say, I'm happy that JDM is staying on the card. He's a phenomenal fighter, you know, but it's all about that for me. You know, it's all about that main card. That main event, like we say, is really intriguing. The co-main event is a pick 'em, you know, like you say, if you pick Pantoja, yeah. If you pick Brandon Moreno, yeah. I think we'll either see a changing of the guard with Dricus du Plessis against Robert Whittaker, or we'll just see what we're kind of predicting here is Robert Whittaker will run through Dricus du Plessis because he's just a better fighter. And more importantly, we will be back next week breaking it all down in detail for you. We've also got a PFL Europe card. It's okay. You know, I'm disenfranchised with the PFL at the moment just because of all the drug failures and whatnot. I'm a little bit, I'm not all in on PFL at the moment, but it's all about international fight. We've got Hall of Fame, plenty of content out on MMASucka.com. So keep it locked to the website. All the links and the good stuff will be down below. Like and comment and all that stuff, because this is just my opinion. It's just Tim's opinion. If you've got a different opinion, drop it in the comments and we'll have a discussion about it. But it's the MMA Sucka Podcast. Tim, any last words?
Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate that.
Thank you.